Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel. What part of the world are you listening to this from? Write your answer in the comments. Now let's get to the story. I always thought my life was picture perfect. A wife who loved me, a brother who was my best friend, and a future so bright it felt almost unfair. For 10 years, I built a marriage on trust, believing we were a team against the world. Jenna, my wife, had always been the kind of woman people described as out of my league. She was vibrant, intelligent, and effortlessly beautiful. My brother Derek had been my rock since childhood, a charming, mischievous partner in crime. It was a dynamic that worked, or so I thought. The first crack in my reality appeared one unassuming Saturday morning. Jenna was in the kitchen humming a tune, flipping pancakes for our daughter, Mia. Derek, as he often did, had dropped by for breakfast. It wasn't unusual. He lived close, and Jenna always insisted on feeding him like he was an extension of the family. "Morning, bro," Derek greeted me, flashing his signature grin as I walked into the kitchen. "Smells good in here." "Sure does," I replied, kissing Jenna's cheek. She turned slightly, her smile warmer than usual. I chalked it up to her being in a good mood. Why wouldn't she be? Life was good, or so I believed. That morning, there were subtle moments I didn't fully register then, the way Derek's gaze lingered on Jenna when he thought I wasn't looking, or the way her laugh seemed a little too genuine at one of his jokes. I told myself I was imagining things, the first whisper of doubt quickly brushed aside. After all, what reason did I have not to trust them? The day passed uneventfully, and it wasn't until the evening, as Jenna showered and her phone buzzed on the nightstand, that the foundation of my life began to crumble. Normally, I wouldn't have given it a second thought. We respected each other's privacy. But something about the way the screen lit up with a message labeled, "D, not at me." I told myself it was probably Derek. He and Jenna were close, like siblings, really. That's how it had always been. Still, a niggling feeling urged me to pick up the phone. I hesitated, my heart pounding as if sensing the storm ahead. The message preview read, "Last night was incredible. Can't stop thinking about you. When can we meet again?" I froze. The words blurred as my mind raced to make sense of them. My first instinct was denial. This couldn't be real. It had to be a mistake. My hands trembled as I opened the message thread. It was Derek. Message after message painted a picture of betrayal so blatant it made my stomach churn. Texts filled with confessions of desire, secret plans to meet, and a level of intimacy that made me feel like an outsider in my own marriage. Then came the photo. It was a selfie of Jenna, taken in our bedroom, wearing nothing but the smile I used to think was reserved for me. I couldn't breathe. My mind reeled, trying to comprehend how the two people I trusted most had managed to stab me in the back with such precision. A wave of nausea hit me as I scrolled further, piecing together a timeline that went back months, if not longer. The shower stopped, jolting me back to reality. Jenna emerged moments later, wrapped in a towel, her face flushed from the heat. She smiled at me, her expression so normal it made my skin crawl. "You okay?" she asked, noticing my pale face. "Yeah," I managed to say, forcing a tight smile. My heart pounded as I watched her dry her hair, oblivious to the fact that I knew everything. I wanted to confront her then and there, but something held me back. Pride, anger, or maybe the need to plan my next move carefully. I wasn't going to let this go. Not yet. The night dragged on. I barely slept, replaying the messages and photo in my mind. Derek's betrayal stung even more than Jenna's. He was supposed to be my brother, my blood. Morning came, and with it, a new resolve. I wasn't going to let this slide. If they thought they could play me for a fool, they were about to learn just how wrong they were. This wasn't going to end in a screaming match, or a sobbing plea for answers. No, I was going to hit them where it hurt. But first I needed proof, something undeniable. Something that would leave no room for excuses or denials. Jenna and Derek might have thought they were clever, but they underestimated me. I wasn't just going to end this. I was going to destroy the life they thought they could have behind my back. And so, the game began. The first thing I did that morning was call in sick to work. There was no way I could go about my day pretending everything was fine. Every glance at Jenna, every thought of Derek made my blood boil. Yet I kept my face neutral, my tone measured. If they suspected anything, my plan would fall apart before it began. After dropping Nia off at school, Jenna leaned over to kiss me goodbye, like it was any other day. Her lips brushed my cheek, but all I could feel was the weight of her lies. "You okay?" she asked again, her brow furrowed. "You've been quiet." "Just a headache," I said, waving her off. "I'll be fine." She nodded, seemingly satisfied, and drove off in her car. I stood in the driveway, watching her taillights disappear, my fists clenched so tight my nails dug into my palms. Back inside, I pulled out my laptop. I needed more evidence, something irrefutable. Those texts and photos were damning, but I needed a full picture of what I was dealing with. I wasn't just confronting a cheating wife. I was about to face down my brother. I spent the next few hours digging. Jenna's phone was locked now, so I couldn't access it directly. But I knew her email passwords. She'd never bothered to change them since we first got together. It took less than a minute to log in. Her inbox was a treasure trove of deceit. Emails from Derek, each more nauseating than the last, revealed that their affair wasn't just physical. There were plans, discussions about what their life might look like if I weren't in the picture. One email in particular stopped me cold. I still haven't told him. I'm scared. What if he reacts badly? What if he hurts Mia? We have to be careful. I don't want him to think this baby is his. Asterisk. My vision blurred as I read the words again. A baby? I scrolled back, hunting for more clues. Jenna had taken a pregnancy test 2 weeks ago. She'd emailed Derek a photo of the positive result, followed by a message gushing about their future together. This wasn't just an affair. It was a complete betrayal, a replacement of the life we'd built with some twisted fantasy of theirs. My hands shook as I copied every incriminating email, photo, and document onto a flash drive. By the time Jenna got home for lunch, I had already reached out to a private investigator. His name was Thomas Grady, and his reputation for discretion and results preceded him. He didn't ask many questions, which was fine by me. I told him I needed surveillance on my wife and brother, and he agreed to meet me later that evening. Jenna breezed into the house, carrying takeout from my favorite deli. "Thought you might be hungry," she said, setting the bag on the counter. "How's your headache?" "Better," I lied, forcing a smile. "Thanks for this." She leaned against the counter, sipping her iced tea. "What about you? What's going on at work?" "Same old," I said casually, hiding the storm raging inside me. She chatted away, oblivious to the fact that every word out of her mouth felt like sandpaper against my nerves. I responded when necessary, careful not to tip her off. Once she left for her afternoon errands, I grabbed the flash drive and headed to Grady's office. Grady was a no-nonsense kind of guy. He wore a suit that looked like it had seen better days, his tie slightly askew. "So, your wife and your brother?" he asked, leaning back in his chair. "Hell of a combination. You don't know the half of it," I replied, sliding the flash drive across his desk. He plugged it in, his face impassive as he scrolled through the files. "This is solid," he said after a moment. "But if you want them to pay, you'll need more. Videos, receipts, something that can't be dismissed as just texts." I nodded. "That's why I'm here. Can you help me?" Grady smirked. "I can help you ruin their lives if that's what you're after." "It is." He laid out the plan: surveillance cameras at home, GPS trackers on Jenna's car, and a full schedule of Derek's movements. He even offered to tap into their social media and phone records. "Give me a week," he said, standing. "By then, you'll have everything you need." The next few days were excruciating. Jenna carried on like nothing was wrong, and I played the role of the oblivious husband. At night, I'd lie awake, staring at the ceiling, imagining how I'd confront them both. One evening, as we watched TV, Jenna reached over and rested her hand on my leg. "You've seemed distant lately," she said softly. "Is something wrong?" I shook my head, forcing a yawn. "Work stress, that's all." She smiled, rubbing my leg gently. "You know you can talk to me, right? I'm here for you." Her words were like poison. I wanted to shout, to tell her I knew everything. But I bit my tongue, knowing that the time wasn't right. On the 6th day, Grady called. "We got it," he said, his voice triumphant. "Meet me at the office. You're gonna want to see this." When I arrived, Grady handed me a folder thick with photos and documents. My stomach turned as I flipped through them. Jenna and Derek at a motel just outside town, their cars parked side by side. Videos of them meeting at a cafe, hands brushing across the table. GPS logs of their late-night rendezvous. But the final nail in the coffin was a recording from a hidden camera Grady had installed in Jenna's car. "You sure about this?" Derek's voice asked, slightly muffled. "I am," Jenna replied. "Once I tell him the truth, it's over. He'll never forgive me. But you'll be there, right? For me and the baby?" "Always," Derek said. I closed the folder, my hands trembling. "What now?" Grady asked. "No," I said, my voice cold. "We burn their world to the ground." The evidence I now possessed felt like a double-edged sword. On one hand, it vindicated my gut instincts, proving Jenna and Derek's betrayal. On the other, it carried the crushing weight of reality. The people I trusted most weren't just cheating, they were plotting to dismantle the life I'd built. I couldn't let them win. The first step in my plan was patience. As much as I wanted to confront them right then and there, I needed to be methodical. If I struck too soon, they'd find ways to manipulate the situation, twist the narrative, or make me look like the irrational one. I wasn't going to give them the chance. When I got home that evening, Jenna was already asleep on the couch, her body draped over a throw blanket. The TV played softly in the background, a show she wasn't even pretending to watch. She looked so innocent, so serene. If I hadn't known better, I might have kissed her forehead and carried her to bed. But now, her image only filled me with anger. How many times had I been the fool, trusting her without question? How many nights had she slept in our bed after sneaking off to see Derek? I turned off the TV and went upstairs. Sleep didn't come easily. My mind kept circling the events to come, rehearsing every possible scenario. By the time the sun rose, I'd already finalized my strategy. The following morning, I emailed Grady to ensure everything was set. The GPS tracker on Jenna's car was active, and he'd hired a tech specialist to monitor Derek's online activity. Any new messages or photos between the two of them would be intercepted and sent to me immediately. But it wasn't enough to simply gather more evidence. I needed to bait them into a situation where they'd feel untouchable, where their guard would drop entirely. That's when I came up with the perfect trap, a fake weekend business trip. Over breakfast, I casually mentioned that my company was sending me out of town for a conference. "It's only 2 days," I said, biting into my toast. "I'll leave Friday night and be back Sunday afternoon." Jenna barely looked up from her coffee. "That's fine. Mia and I will have a girls' weekend." The way she said it, so nonchalant, infuriated me. She didn't even bother to ask about the conference details. Her indifference was confirmation enough. She already had plans. I texted Grady as soon as I got to work. "Me. The trap is set. Keep an eye on her and Derek this weekend." Grady. "Got it. I'll have a team in place." By Friday evening, I had packed a small bag and kissed Jenna goodbye at the door. "Be safe," she said, her smile warm and disarming. "I will," I replied, masking my disgust with a smile of my own. Once I was out of sight, I parked my car at a nearby friend's house and called a cab. Grady had secured a small apartment for me to use as a base of operations for the weekend. It wasn't much, just a bed, a desk, and a coffee pot, but it would do. I spent the first few hours reviewing the surveillance feed. Grady had installed hidden cameras in our house earlier in the week, disguised as mundane objects. One was in the living room clock, another in the hallway, and a third in the garage. At 9 p.m., Jenna's phone buzzed. She picked it up, her face lighting up with excitement. "Hey," she said softly. "He's gone for the weekend. Are you coming over?" My chest tightened as I watched her expression shift. She looked like a teenager sneaking out to meet a forbidden lover. A muffled voice on the other end of the call replied. It was Derek. "Yeah, I'll be there in an hour. Can't wait to see you." Jenna laughed, the sound grating against my ears. "Me neither. Drive safe." She hung up and immediately started tidying the living room, humming as she worked. The audacity of it all made my stomach churn. Grady's team was stationed nearby, ready to document everything. I wasn't just gathering evidence for my own satisfaction. I wanted to destroy any chance Jenna and Derek had of spinning this into something innocent. At 10:15 p.m., Derek's car pulled into my driveway. I watched on the screen as Jenna opened the door, greeting him with a kiss that made my blood boil. He carried a bottle of wine and a bag of takeout, and the two of them laughed as they walked inside. "This is it," I muttered, clenching my fists. For the next 2 hours I watched them. They sat on my couch, eating and drinking like they didn't have a care in the world. Jenna leaned against Derek, her head on his shoulder, her hands tracing circles on his chest. The final blow came when they disappeared upstairs. My phone buzzed. It was Grady. "Grady, we're getting everything. You sure you're ready to blow this up?" "Me. Absolutely. But not tonight. Let them think they've gotten away with it." I wasn't done with them yet. By the time Derek left the house in the early hours of the morning, I had everything I needed. The video footage, the GPS logs, and the intercepted messages painted a crystal-clear picture of their affair. But I wasn't going to confront them in private. No, I wanted an audience. Over the next few days, I put the final pieces of my plan into motion. I reached out to Jenna's friends, family, and coworkers, inviting them to a surprise celebration for our anniversary. I made sure Derek was on the guest list too. The event was scheduled for Saturday evening, just over a week away. I rented a venue, hired a caterer, and even sent out formal invitations. Jenna was thrilled, assuming it was a romantic gesture on my part. "It's so sweet of you to do this," she gushed one night. I smiled, hiding the rage bubbling beneath the surface. "I just want everyone to see how much you mean to me," I said. She kissed me, and for the first time, I didn't kiss back. Saturday couldn't come fast enough. The pieces were all in place. Next week, in front of everyone they cared about, Jenna and Derek would learn what it felt like to be utterly destroyed. The week leading up to the party was excruciating. Every second in Jenna's presence felt like torture. She was radiant, excited about the anniversary celebration I had so carefully planned. She had no idea it was her reckoning. Derek had no clue either. He still came by occasionally, his smug grin infuriating me to the core. Watching him sit in my kitchen, laughing with my wife, felt like being stabbed repeatedly. The only thing keeping me sane was knowing that, soon, he'd be humiliated beyond repair. I finalized the last of the preparations by Thursday. The guest list was confirmed, friends, family, even a few of Jenna's co-workers and Derek's so-called buddies. I'd been careful to invite people who would serve as witnesses, ensuring no detail of the coming disaster would be lost. Grady handed me the edited surveillance footage that morning. I trimmed it down to the essentials. He explained, sliding the flash drive across the table. The video started with Jenna inviting Derek into our home, followed by a sequence of intimate moments on the couch. It culminated in the damning upstairs footage. Grady had blurred the explicit parts, but there was no mistaking the identities of the two people tangled together in my bedroom. "This should do the trick," I said, pocketing the drive. Grady raised an eyebrow. "You're really going through with this? Publicly?" I nodded. "They deserve it." He didn't press further, only offering a curt nod before leaving. By Saturday, the tension in the air was palpable. Jenna spent the day getting ready, trying on dresses and asking my opinion. She finally settled on a deep blue gown that hugged her figure, a dress Derek had once complimented during a family dinner. The thought of it made my jaw tighten, but I kept my expression neutral. "You look beautiful," I said, the words like acid on my tongue. She beamed, completely oblivious. "Thank you, honey. I'm so excited for tonight." I nodded, swallowing the bow rising in my throat. The venue was perfect, tastefully decorated with white tablecloths, dim lighting, and floral centerpieces. Guests began to arrive promptly at 6 p.m., filling the room with laughter and conversation. Jenna glided through the crowd, greeting everyone with her usual charm. Derek arrived 30 minutes later, wearing a tailored suit and that infuriating grin. He waved at me like nothing was wrong, his confidence sickening. "Hey bro," he said, clapping me on the back. "This is great. You really went all out." I forced a smile. "Only the best for my wife." He chuckled, oblivious to the double meaning in my words. By 7 p.m., the room was buzzing with energy. People were eating, drinking, and toasting to Jenna and me as a perfect couple. I watched her bask in the compliments, Derek hovering nearby like a shadow. Finally, the moment arrived. I tapped my glass, signaling for attention. The room quieted, all eyes on me. "Thank you all for coming," I began, my voice steady despite the adrenaline coursing through my veins. "I wanted to take this opportunity to celebrate not just my marriage, but also the people who've been a part of our journey." Jenna smiled warmly, her cheeks flushed from the wine and attention. Derek stood at the edge of the crowd, looking smug. "But tonight's not just about celebrating the past," I continued, locking eyes with Jenna. "It's also about revealing the truth." Her smile faltered, confusion flashing across her face. "I've put together something special to share with all of you," I said, pulling a small remote from my pocket. I pointed it at the projector set up in the corner. The screen came to life, and the room plunged into silence. The first clip was harmless enough, Jenna opening the door for Derek, a friendly hug. But as the footage progressed, the atmosphere in the room shifted. Gasps echoed as the video showed their laughter on the couch, the wine glasses, and finally the kiss. "Wait," someone whispered. The next clip showed Jenna leading Derek upstairs. Though the explicit moments were blurred, the implications were unmistakable. Jenna's face turned ghostly pale. "Oh my God!" she muttered, covering her mouth. Derek froze, his cocky demeanor replaced with wide-eyed panic. I clicked the remote, pausing the video. The room was deathly silent. "I think it's safe to say this isn't what any of you expected," I said, my voice cold. "But I couldn't let this celebration continue under false pretenses." "Jason, I can explain," Jenna stammered, stepping toward me. "Don't bother," I snapped. "The evidence speaks for itself." I turned to Derek, my voice dripping with venom. "And you, my own brother! How long has this been going on? Do you even care about what you've done to this family?" He opened his mouth to respond, but nothing came out. The crowd began to murmur, the weight of the revelation sinking in. Jenna's parents looked horrified, her mother shaking her head in disbelief. Derek's friends glared at him, their expressions a mix of disgust and pity. "Jason, please," Jenna begged, tears streaming down her face. "It was a mistake." "A mistake?" I laughed bitterly. "Don't insult my intelligence, Jenna. This wasn't a mistake. This was months of lies, deceit, and betrayal." I turned back to the crowd, my voice rising. "I invited all of you here tonight because I wanted you to see the truth. I wanted you to understand what I've been living with while these two have been planning their little fantasy life behind my back." Derek tried to interject, but the room erupted into chaos. People shouted questions, accusations flew, and the whispers turned into an uproar. Jenna crumbled, sinking to her knees as the weight of her actions crashed down on her. But I wasn't done. "There's one more thing you should all know," I said, my voice cutting through the noise. "Jenna's pregnant." The room fell silent again. "And it's not my child." Jenna sobbed openly now, her hands trembling as she reached for me. Derek stood frozen, his face pale as the implications of my words hit him. "Congratulations, Derek," I spat. "You've won. But don't think for a second that you're getting away with this unscathed. The room was chaos. Guests murmured in disbelief, their voices overlapping into an unintelligible hum. Jenna remained on the floor, her hands trembling as she sobbed uncontrollably. Derek, usually so confident and collected, stood frozen like a deer in headlights. I reveled in the storm I'd created. For months they'd played me for a fool. Now the spotlight was on them, exposing every lie and betrayal. "Jason, please," Jenna begged, her voice hoarse. She reached for me, but I stepped back, glaring down at her. "Save your breath," I snapped, my voice cold and cutting. "There's nothing you can say that will fix this." "Bro, Derek started, but I silenced him with a sharp look. "Don't even try, Derek," I hissed. "You're not my brother anymore. You're a backstabbing piece of trash." The crowd watched in stunned silence, eyes darting between the three of us. Some tried to slip away, not wanting to be part of the spectacle, while others stayed rooted, too engrossed to leave. Jenna's mother was the first to break through the noise. "Is it true?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Jenna, tell me this isn't true." Jenna turned to her mother, sobbing harder. "Mom, I didn't mean for this to happen." Her father stood beside her mother, his face a mask of anger and disappointment. "Didn't mean for it to happen?" he repeated, his voice rising. "How do you accidentally betray your husband with his own brother?" "Enough," I said, raising my hand to silence them. "Let her wallow in her excuses later. Right now, I have more to say." I turned my gaze to Derek. "You didn't just betray me," I began, my voice steady but filled with venom. "You betrayed this entire family. For what? A fling? A cheap thrill?" Derek shifted uncomfortably, unable to meet my eyes. "You thought you could just take what's mine and there wouldn't be consequences?" I continued, taking a step closer to him. "Let me tell you something, Derek, you've made the biggest mistake of your life." "I didn't mean," he started, but I cut him off. "Didn't mean what? To sleep with my wife? To get her pregnant? Spare me your pathetic excuses." Jenna's cries grew louder, but I ignored her. My focus was on Derek, who was now sweating under the weight of everyone's judgment. "You can have her," I said, my voice dripping with disdain. "But don't think for a second that I'm letting you walk away from this unscathed." Derek swallowed hard, his face pale. "What are you gonna do?" I smirked. "Oh, you'll find out soon enough. Trust me, you won't like it." I turned back to the crowd, addressing everyone. "Thank you all for coming tonight," I said, sarcasm thick in my tone. "I'm sure this isn't the celebration you were expecting, but at least now you know the truth." I picked up my glass of champagne, raising it mockingly. "To Jenna and Derek," I said, my voice loud enough to carry across the room. "May your lies and betrayal bring you the happiness you so desperately sought." With that, I downed the champagne in one gulp and slammed the glass onto the table, shattering it. The sound echoed, silencing the murmurs of the crowd. I walked out of the venue without looking back, leaving Jenna and Derek to deal with the fallout. As I stepped into the cool night air, I felt a strange mix of emotions: anger, satisfaction, and a deep, aching sadness. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The next morning, I started phase 2 of my plan. The party was just the beginning. I wanted them to feel the full weight of their actions, to lose everything they'd taken for granted. I called my lawyer, a sharp and ruthless woman named Patricia Klein. "I need to start divorce proceedings," I told her bluntly. She didn't miss a beat. "Do you have evidence of infidelity?" "Oh, I've got more than enough," I replied, sending her the folder of photos, messages, and videos. Her voice was firm but approving. "Good. This will make things easier. What about assets? Do you want to fight for the house, joint accounts, or custody?" "The house is mine," I said flatly. "She can rot before I let her keep it. As for custody, Mia stays with me." "Understood," Patricia said. "With this evidence, we'll have a strong case. I'll draft the papers and serve her this week." Next, I made a call to Grady. Do you have the financial records I asked for? Yep, he said. Your brother's been pretty careless. Looks like he's been siphoning funds from your parents' estate to cover his own debts. I clenched my jaw, barely containing my rage. Perfect. Compile everything. I want to take this to the family attorney. You got it, Grady replied. Derek thought he could betray me and still live his life without consequences. He was about to learn otherwise. Later that day, Jenna called me. I let it go to voicemail, but her message was predictably pathetic. Jason, please call me back. We need to talk. I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Please, let's work this out. For Mia's sake. Her audacity was staggering. Did she think an apology would undo the damage she'd caused? I deleted the message without responding. By the end of the week, everything was in motion. Patricia served Jenna with divorce papers, and my parents' attorney received the financial evidence against Derek. Word spread quickly through the family, and Derek's reputation took a nosedive. But the piece de resistance was still to come. Grady uncovered one final piece of leverage, a scandal involving Derek at his job. It seemed my dear brother had been skimming money from his company as well, using fraudulent invoices to line his pockets. I had everything I needed to destroy him, both personally and professionally. The storm wasn't over. It was just getting started. By the time Monday rolled around, the firestorm was well underway. Jenna had called and texted repeatedly, each message more desperate than the last. Derek hadn't reached out directly, probably realizing that he'd only make things worse for himself. But their silence wouldn't protect them from the consequences I had so carefully engineered. That morning, I met with Patricia in her office. The paperwork for the divorce was already drafted, a meticulous document that left no room for negotiation. This is airtight, Patricia assured me, sliding the stack of papers across her desk. With the evidence you've provided, the judge will have no choice but to rule in your favor. Jenna's going to lose everything. I nodded, my resolve unshaken. She deserves worse than losing everything, I said coldly. This is just step one. Patricia's lips twitched into a faint smile. I'll have these filed today. She'll be served by the end of the week. As I left her office, I felt a grim satisfaction. The foundation of Jenna's life was beginning to crumble, and I had only just begun. The next target was Derek. Grady's findings were damning. Derek had been embezzling funds from his company for years, covering his tracks with forged invoices and false reports. It was only a matter of time before someone noticed the discrepancies, but I decided to speed up the process. Grady handed me a folder containing copies of Derek's fraudulent transactions. This is more than enough to bury him, he said. I can deliver it to his company anonymously if you want. I shook my head. No. I want them to know exactly where it came from. Grady raised an eyebrow but didn't question me. Your call. Just know this might burn any bridges with him permanently. Good, I said flatly. I don't need bridges with traitors. By Tuesday afternoon, Derek's company received an anonymous tip, complete with detailed records of his embezzlement. I imagined the chaos unfolding in his office as his bosses pored over the evidence, piecing together the scope of his betrayal. Later that evening, I got a call from my mother. Jason, what's going on? She demanded, her voice tight with worry. I just heard that Derek might lose his job. Is this because of what happened with Jenna? I took a deep breath, steeling myself. Mom, Derek brought this on himself. He betrayed me, he betrayed the family, and he's been stealing from his company. I'm not going to sit back and let him get away with it. Her silence was deafening. When she finally spoke, her voice was softer, almost pleading. I understand you're hurt, Jason. But he's still your brother. Not anymore, I said, my tone final. He made his choice. Now he has to live with it. Meanwhile, Jenna's life was unraveling faster than she could keep up. The divorce papers hit her like a freight train, and the details I'd included left no room for doubt about her infidelity. She called me that night, her voice trembling. Jason, please, can we talk? There's nothing to talk about, I replied coldly. Don't do this, she begged. Think about Mia. She needs both of us. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. Mia deserves better than to live in a house built on lies. You made your bed, Jenna? Now lie in it. Before she could respond, I hung up. By Wednesday, Derek's company had taken action. He was suspended pending a full investigation, but the writing was on the wall. He wouldn't be able to talk his way out of this one. Jenna, meanwhile, had been forced to move back in with her parents. Her mother called me, trying to mediate, but I refused to budge. She's devastated, Jason, her mother said. Is there no way to salvage this? I laughed bitterly. Salvage what? She cheated on me with my brother and got pregnant. What exactly am I supposed to salvage? Her mother sighed. I just don't want to see this destroy the family. The family was destroyed the moment Jenna and Derek made their choices, I said firmly. Now they have to face the consequences. By the end of the week, I had taken care of every loose end. The house was officially mine, and I'd secured full custody of Mia. Jenna would have visitation rights, but only under strict conditions. Grady had uncovered more dirt on Derek, including evidence of unpaid debts and a gambling habit. I made sure it all found its way into the right hands: creditors, law enforcement, and even a few family members who still thought Derek was a golden boy. Friday night, I sat in my now quiet house, sipping a glass of whiskey. For the first time in weeks, I felt a sense of peace. The people who had betrayed me were finally facing the consequences of their actions. But there was still one thing left to do. On Saturday morning, I sent a package to Derek's house. Inside was a single, framed photo of the three of us, me, Derek, and Jenna, taken at a family barbecue years ago. I'd scrawled a single word across the glass in red marker. Traitors. I didn't need to see his reaction to know it would cut deep. The final phase of my plan was underway. I'd strip them of their stability, their reputations, and their illusions of a happy future. But I wasn't done yet. I was going to make sure they felt the weight of their choices for the rest of their lives. The fallout was spreading fast, like a wildfire I had set deliberately. Everywhere Jenna and Derek turned, they found the walls closing in. For the first time, they were experiencing the crushing weight of betrayal, not just from me, but from the family, friends, and colleagues who now saw them for what they truly were. Jenna's life, once so meticulously constructed, was crumbling. She'd moved back in with her parents, who were barely speaking to her. Her father, a stoic man with a strong sense of honor, couldn't even look her in the eye. Her mother, though softer in her approach, wasn't much better. One afternoon, I got an unexpected call from her mother. Jason, I know you're hurt, she began cautiously. But please don't punish Jenna too harshly. She made a mistake, yes, but... A mistake? I interrupted, my voice sharp. Sleeping with my brother, lying to my face, and getting pregnant wasn't a mistake. It was a series of deliberate choices. Her mother sighed heavily. She's still the mother of your child. She's devastated. She's lost everything. She hasn't lost everything yet, I replied coldly. But she will. Actions have consequences. Her mother's voice trembled. This is tearing our family apart. I exhaled slowly, my patience thinning. Your daughter did that. Not me. Don't forget that. Meanwhile, Derek was spiraling. The suspension from his company turned into a formal termination after they completed their internal investigation. His once comfortable lifestyle, expensive suits, flashy car, and luxury apartment, was slipping away. I'd heard from mutual friends that he tried to reach out to our parents, but they weren't having it. Your father's furious with him, my mom told me during a strained phone call. He won't even take Derek's calls. Good, I replied. He doesn't deserve any sympathy. My mom hesitated. Jason, I'm not excusing what he did. But, he's still your brother. No, Mom, I said firmly. He's not. He lost that title the moment he decided to sleep with my wife. She didn't push further, sensing there was no room for compromise. The one person who remained untouched by the chaos was Mia. I shielded her from everything, ensuring she was insulated from the drama. To her, it was just a period of change, moving to a new school and adjusting to seeing her mother less often. Jenna had visitation rights, but they were supervised and strictly limited. Every time I dropped Mia off at Jenna's parents' house, Jenna tried to talk to me. "Jason, please," she begged during one exchange. "Can we just sit down and talk?" I looked at her, my face a mask of indifference. "We have nothing to talk about except Mia. That's it." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't care. My satisfaction grew as the pieces of my plan continued to fall into place. By the end of the week, Derek was drowning in debt. Grady had uncovered a slew of unpaid loans and credit card bills that Derek had been juggling. With no income and no allies left to bail him out, he was on the brink of financial ruin. One of Derek's friends, a man named Marcus, called me unexpectedly. "Jason, I know what Derek did was messed up," Marcus said, "but this is getting out of hand. He's in a bad place." "Good," I replied bluntly. Marcus sighed. "Come on, man. He's losing everything. His job, his reputation, his family. Do you expect me to feel sorry for him?" I snapped. He didn't think about any of that when he was screwing my wife. Marcus didn't have a response for that. While Jenna and Derek were facing their own demons, I was preparing the next stage of my revenge. The financial ruin and public humiliation were satisfying, but I wanted them to feel the pain on a deeper level. Grady handed me a file one morning, his face grim. "This is the last piece of the puzzle," he said. The file contained more evidence, emails, texts, and financial documents, that painted an even darker picture of Derek's actions. Among them were messages where he joked with Jenna about how easily they'd fooled me. One in particular stood out. "He has no idea. Honestly, I feel bad for him sometimes. But then I remember how much better we are together." My hands clenched into fists as I read the words. "Burn them both," I muttered. Grady nodded. "Consider it done." The next few days were a whirlwind of activity. I sent copies of the new evidence to everyone who mattered, family members, close friends, even a few of Derek's former coworkers. I wanted them all to see the depths of his betrayal and dishonesty. The fallout was immediate. Derek's remaining friends abandoned him, his network of support crumbling completely. Jenna, meanwhile, was ostracized by her social circle. Her friends, once loyal and supportive, now kept their distance. The shame was too much for most of them to bear. By the weekend, the pieces were falling into place perfectly. Jenna and Derek were isolated, humiliated, and drowning in the consequences of their actions. But I wasn't done. I had one final move left, a blow so devastating that neither of them would recover. As I sat in my living room that Saturday night, sipping a glass of whiskey, I smiled to myself. This wasn't just revenge. This was justice. By the time the next week began, Jenna and Derek were barely clinging to what little they had left. Jenna's once charmed life as a beloved wife and mother was reduced to a hollow shell. Derek, who had always been the charismatic golden boy, was now a pariah. But I wasn't satisfied. Not yet. I had one final move to play, something that would ensure they never recover, not socially, professionally, or personally. Grady had dug deep into Derek's financial dealings and Jenna's professional life, uncovering information that would be the keystone to my ultimate plan. "This is it," Grady said as he handed me the folder. Inside were two critical pieces of information. Derek had been siphoning funds not only from his former job but also from a family account tied to our late grandmother's inheritance. Jenna's recent promotion at her company wasn't earned, it was the result of blackmailing her boss, a married man with a history of indiscretions. The audacity of their actions left me both furious and exhilarated. "They didn't just betray me," I muttered. "They betrayed everyone." Grady nodded. "What's the plan?" "Expose them both. Publicly." I spent the next few days preparing meticulously. The evidence against Derek and Jenna was compiled into a neat package: emails, text messages, financial statements, and surveillance footage. It wasn't just incriminating, it was devastating. My first target was Derek. On Wednesday morning, I walked into my parents' home, where they were hosting a small family gathering. It was supposed to be a casual brunch, but I had other plans. Derek wasn't there. He'd wisely stayed away from family functions since the scandal broke. But that didn't matter. This wasn't about confronting him directly. As everyone gathered around the dining table, I stood and cleared my throat. "Before we eat, there's something I need to share with all of you," I began, holding up the folder. "Jason, what is this?" my mother asked, her brow furrowing. "It's the truth," I replied, placing the folder on the table. "The full extent of what Derek has done, not just to me, but to this family." I handed copies of the documents to everyone present. The room grew eerily silent as they flipped through the pages. Gasps filled the air as the details of Derek's embezzlement and theft from the family account came to light. My father's face turned red with fury, his hands trembling as he read. "He stole from us?" my father roared, slamming the folder onto the table. "Yes," I said evenly. "And he thought he could get away with it." My mother covered her mouth, tears welling in her eyes. "How could he? This is why he's losing everything," I continued. "Because he's not just a liar, he's a thief." The fallout was immediate. My parents vowed to cut Derek out of their wills entirely and pursue legal action to reclaim the stolen inheritance. My father, who had been hesitant to fully sever ties with Derek, now called him directly, leaving a scathing voicemail. "You're no longer my son," he said, his voice shaking with anger. "Don't ever contact this family again." Next, it was Jenna's turn. On Thursday morning, I sent an anonymous package to her company's HR department. Inside were copies of the incriminating messages she'd sent to her boss, as well as evidence of the affair she'd used as leverage for her promotion. By lunchtime, Jenna called me in a panic. "Jason!" she cried, her voice frantic. "What did you do? What are you talking about?" I asked coldly, feigning ignorance. "You sent those emails to my job!" she screamed. "They've suspended me while they investigate." I smirked, though she couldn't see it. "Sounds like you're finally facing the consequences of your actions, Jenna." "You're ruining my life," she sobbed. "No, Jenna," I said, my tone icy. "You ruined your life. I'm just making sure everyone knows it." By the end of the day, Jenna's boss had resigned in disgrace, and she was terminated from her position. The company issued a public statement about their zero-tolerance policy for ethical violations, leaving her reputation in shreds. With both Jenna and Derek officially destroyed, I turned my attention to ensuring Mia's future. I met with my lawyer, Patricia, to finalize the custody agreement. "With Jenna unemployed and facing reputational damage, you have an even stronger case for full custody," Patricia said. "Good," I replied. "I don't want her anywhere near Mia until she gets her life together, and even then, it'll be on my terms." The final phase of my plan was a public reckoning. On Saturday, I uploaded a detailed exposé to a private family and friends group, complete with all the evidence against Jenna and Derek. I didn't hold back, laying bare every betrayal, every lie, and every crime. The response was overwhelming. Messages of support flooded in, alongside outrage directed at Jenna and Derek. Their remaining allies abandoned them, unwilling to be associated with such disgrace. By the end of the week, they were utterly isolated. Derek was jobless, in debt, and estranged from the family. Jenna was homeless, unemployed, and shunned by her social circle. I, on the other hand, felt a sense of closure I hadn't expected. That night, as I sat on the back porch with a glass of whiskey, I thought about everything I'd lost, and everything I'd gained. Mia was safe, my life was my own again, and the people who had wronged me were facing the consequences of their choices. For the first time in months, I felt a glimmer of peace. With Jenna and Derek thoroughly dismantled, I thought I'd feel satisfied. I'd watched them lose their reputations, careers, and the respect of everyone they once held dear. Yet, as I sat in the quiet of my now peaceful home, I realized there was one piece of unfinished business gnawing at me: the confrontation. I'd left Jenna and Derek to stew in the aftermath of my revenge, letting the evidence and public scorn do the talking. But I hadn't looked them in the eyes since the party. I hadn't given them the chance to see the man they'd underestimated. That was about to change. I arranged to meet Derek first. He was staying in a cheap motel on the edge of town, his luxurious apartment long since vacated. Grady had confirmed his exact location, and I arrived unannounced on a drizzly Tuesday afternoon. I knocked on the flimsy door, the sound echoing in the dim corridor. Moments later, Derek opened it, his face pale and gaunt. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. "Jason?" he croaked, surprise and dread flickering in his eyes. "We need to talk," I said, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. The room was a mess. Empty beer bottles littered the counter, and the air reeked of stale sweat and despair. Derek stumbled back, gesturing vaguely at the single chair in the corner. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice shaky. I didn't sit. I didn't even blink. "I want to know why." He blinked, clearly thrown off by the question. "Why what?" "Why you did it," I said coldly. "Why you betrayed me, your own brother. Why you threw away everything we had for someone like Jenna." Derek ran a hand through his disheveled hair, avoiding my gaze. "I don't know, man. It just happened." "It didn't just happen," I snapped, my voice rising. "You made a choice, Derek. Over and over again, you made a choice to stab me in the back. So tell me, what was it? Was it jealousy? Greed? Or are you just that pathetic?" He flinched but didn't respond. "Answer me," I demanded, stepping closer. "I don't know," he shouted, his voice cracking. "Okay? I don't know why I did it. Maybe I was jealous. Maybe I wanted what you had. Or maybe I just didn't care." His admission hit like a punch to the gut, but I didn't flinch. "You didn't care," I repeated slowly, the words tasting bitter on my tongue. Derek sank onto the bed, his head in his hands. "I screwed up. I know that. But it's too late to fix anything now." "You're damn right it's too late," I said, my tone venomous. "You're not my brother anymore. You're nothing to me." He looked up, tears streaming down his face. "Jason, please. Save it," I said, cutting him off. "You made your bed. Now lie in it." Without another word, I turned and walked out, leaving Derek alone with his misery. Next, it was Jenna's turn. She was still staying at her parents' house, though I'd heard through mutual contacts that they were growing tired of her presence. It was only a matter of time before she'd be forced to find a new place to stay. I showed up unannounced, as I had with Derek. Her mother answered the door, her expression a mix of surprise and unease. "Jason," she said cautiously, "what are you doing here?" "I need to speak to Jenna," I said, my tone leaving no room for argument. She hesitated but stepped aside. "She's in the living room." Jenna was sitting on the couch, staring blankly at the TV. She looked up as I entered, her face crumpling the moment she saw me. "Jason," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "We need to talk," I said, sitting in the armchair across from her. She nodded, wiping her eyes. "I know. I owe you an explanation." "I'm not here for your excuses," I interrupted. "I want answers. Honest ones." She swallowed hard, her hands twisting in her lap. "I don't know what you want me to say." "Start with why," I said. "Why you cheated. Why you lied. Why you decided to destroy the life we built together." She took a deep, shuddering breath. "I didn't mean to hurt you, Jason. I swear I didn't. I just felt trapped." "Trapped?" I repeated incredulously. "Trapped by what? A husband who loved you? A family that adored you?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head. "I know it sounds selfish. And it is. But I wasn't happy. I wanted more." "More?" I said, my voice cold. "So you decided to sleep with my brother?" "I didn't plan for it to happen." she said, her voice trembling. It just did. And once it started, I couldn't stop. Her words filled me with a cold rage, but I kept my composure. You couldn't stop, I said. Did you even try? Or was it easier to keep lying, keep sneaking around, and hope I'd never find out? She buried her face in her hands, sobbing. I'm so sorry, Jason. I hate myself for what I did. I wish I could take it all back. But you can't, I said flatly. You made your choices, Jenna. And now you have to live with them. She looked up at me, her eyes red and swollen. Do you hate me? I considered her question for a long moment. No, I said finally. I don't hate you. But I don't love you anymore either. Whatever we had, it's gone. Her sobs grew louder, but I didn't offer comfort. This is the last time we'll ever have a conversation like this, I said, standing. From now on, the only thing I care about is Mia. If it doesn't involve her, don't bother reaching out. Jason, please, she pleaded, but I was already walking away. As I stepped out into the crisp evening air, I felt a strange sense of closure. Confronting them had been painful, but it was necessary. I'd said my piece, and now I could finally move on. They were nothing to me now, just shadows of a life I'd left behind. For the first time in what felt like forever, my life was no longer consumed by Jenna and Derek. The confrontation had been cathartic. I'd laid everything bare, leaving them to wallow in the mess they'd made. Now, it was time to focus on myself and Mia. The house, once filled with tension and lies, now felt like a sanctuary. I spent my mornings drinking coffee on the back porch, listening to birdsong, and planning the day ahead. Mia was thriving, her laughter filling the rooms again as she adjusted to our new routine. Dad, can we go to the park after school? She asked one morning over breakfast. Of course, sweetheart, I replied, ruffling her hair. Anything for you. Her smile was all the motivation I needed to keep moving forward. The legal process of finalizing the divorce was grueling, but Patricia, my lawyer, handled it with ruthless efficiency. Every clause, every condition was meticulously crafted to protect me and Mia. At the final hearing, Jenna sat across from me, her face pale and drawn. She didn't fight the terms, she didn't have the energy or the leverage. When the judge declared the divorce final, I felt an overwhelming sense of relief. It's done, Patricia said, shaking my hand. Thank you, I replied. For everything. She nodded. Take care of yourself, Jason. You've earned it. With the legal battles behind me, I threw myself into rebuilding my life. Work became a source of focus and fulfillment. My colleagues, who had quietly supported me through the ordeal, welcomed me back with open arms. Good to see you smiling again, my coworker Greg said one afternoon. It feels good to smile again, I admitted. I also began reconnecting with old friends, people I'd unintentionally distanced myself from during my marriage. One of them was Rachel, a former classmate I'd known since high school. Jason, Carl, she exclaimed when I ran into her at a coffee shop. I haven't seen you in years. We spent an hour catching up, laughing about old times and sharing updates about our lives. Rachel had recently moved back to town after a divorce of her own, and we bonded over our shared experiences. I'm glad we ran into each other, she said as we exchanged numbers. Let's not lose touch this time. Deal, I said, feeling a flicker of something I hadn't felt in a long time, hope. Mia's happiness became my top priority. I enrolled her in art classes and joined her for movie nights, making sure she always felt loved and secure. Dad, you're the best, she said one evening, curling up next to me on the couch. Her words meant everything to me. Meanwhile, Derek and Jenna were still dealing with the fallout of their actions. Word spread quickly about Derek's financial crimes and Jenna's workplace scandal. They were both effectively blacklisted, unable to rebuild the lives they'd once taken for granted. I didn't take any pleasure in their suffering, but I didn't feel sorry for them either. They'd earned every bit of it. Months passed, and life began to feel normal again. I even started seeing Rachel more often, dinners, walks in the park, and long conversations that stretched into the night. She was a breath of fresh air, her kindness and humor reminding me what it felt like to truly connect with someone. "You seem happier," she said during one of our walks. "I am," I admitted. "Thanks to Mia. And, well, thanks to you." She smiled, her cheeks flushing slightly. One evening, as Mia and I were playing a board game, I received an unexpected message. It was from Derek. "Jason, I know I'm the last person you want to hear from, but I need to say this. I'm sorry. I messed up, and I ruined everything. I don't expect forgiveness, but I want you to know I regret what I did every single day." I stared at the message, unsure how to feel. His apology was unexpected, but it didn't change anything. I typed a short reply. "I appreciate the apology, but I can't forgive you. Don't contact me again." The next morning, I deleted the message and moved on. Derek and Jenna were relics of a past I no longer cared to revisit. My focus was on the present, on Mia, on my career, and on the possibility of a brighter future. One Saturday, as I watched Mia run across the park with her friends, Rachel sat beside me on the bench. "You've come a long way," she said softly. "Yeah," I said, smiling as Mia waved at me from the playground. "I have." She nudged me playfully. "So, what's next for Jason Carl?" I chuckled. "Honestly? I'm still figuring that out. But for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out." The shadows of betrayal no longer loomed over me. I was free, and for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. The summer breeze felt different this year, lighter, freer, as if the weight I'd been carrying for months had finally lifted. I had rebuilt my life piece by piece, and now I was living for myself and Mia, free of the toxicity that had once consumed our home. My mornings were peaceful, my nights filled with laughter as Mia and I settled into a rhythm that was ours alone. Rachel had become a regular presence in our lives, her warmth and humor bringing a sense of comfort I hadn't realized I needed. It was on one of those quiet mornings, while sipping coffee on the porch, that I decided to take the next step in reclaiming my happiness. For months, I'd been focused on undoing the damage Jenna and Derek had done, legally, emotionally, and financially. Now I wanted to do something positive, something that would move me forward. I picked up my phone and dialed Rachel's number. "Hey, Jason," she answered, her voice cheerful. "Hey," I said, smiling. "You busy tonight?" "Not really." "Why?" "I was thinking we could grab dinner, just the two of us." There was a pause, followed by a soft laugh. "Are you asking me out on a date?" "Maybe," I said, grinning. "I'd love to," she replied, and I could hear the smile in her voice. That evening, I dropped Mia off at my parents' house. My mom hugged me tightly, her lingering guilt over Derek's actions still evident in her eyes. "Have fun tonight," she said, squeezing my arm. "I will," I promised. Rachel and I met at a small Italian restaurant downtown. It was cozy, with soft lighting and a low hum of conversation filling the air. She looked stunning in a simple black dress, her hair falling in soft waves around her shoulders. "You clean up well," she teased as I pulled out her chair. "So do you," I said, smiling as I sat across from her. The dinner was perfect, easy conversation, genuine laughter, and a sense of connection that felt natural and unforced. "Can I be honest?" she said as we shared a slice of tiramisu for dessert. "Always. I wasn't sure you were ready for this," she admitted. "After everything you've been through." I nodded, setting down my fork. "There was a time when I wasn't. But now, I feel like I can finally breathe again. And being with you, it feels right." She smiled, her eyes glistening. "It feels right to me too." By the time we left the restaurant, the air between us had shifted. We walked through the quiet streets, her hand brushing against mine until I took it in my own. It was simple, but it meant everything. At her door, I hesitated, unsure if I should lean in or say goodnight. She made the decision for me, pressing her lips to mine in a kiss that was soft, warm, and full of promise. "Good night, Jason," she said, her cheeks flushed. Good night, I replied, smiling as I walked back to my car. For the first time in years, I felt something I hadn't thought possible: hope for the future. The next morning, Mia was full of questions. Did you have fun with Miss Rachel? She asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. I did, I said, ruffling her hair. Are you gonna marry her? I laughed. Let's not get ahead of ourselves, kiddo. Mia grinned. I like her. She makes you happy? She makes me happy too, I said, pulling her into a hug. As the weeks passed, Rachel and I grew closer. She became a part of our routine, joining us for dinners, movie nights, and trips to the park. Mia adored her, and Rachel treated her with the kind of kindness and respect that melted my heart. You're really good with her, I said one evening as we watched Mia play on the swings. She's a great kid, Rachel replied, smiling. You've done an amazing job with her, Jason. Thanks, I said, my chest tightening with gratitude. She looked at me, her expression serious. You've been through so much, but you never let it break you. That says a lot about who you are. I shrugged. I just did what I had to do. Well, I think you're incredible, she said softly, taking my hand. Meanwhile, Jenna and Derek were still facing the consequences of their actions. Jenna had been forced to move into a small apartment, her career in shambles. She saw Mia during supervised visits, but our relationship remained icy and transactional. Derek, from what I'd heard, was bouncing between odd jobs and barely scraping by. The last I'd heard, he moved to a different state, trying to start fresh where no one knew his name. I felt no pity for either of them. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the fallout. My focus, however, was on the life I was building, a life filled with love, laughter, and hope. Rachel became more than just a friend or a romantic interest. She became a partner, someone who stood beside me as I navigated this new chapter. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sunset, she rested her head on my shoulder. Do you ever think about the future? She asked. All the time, I replied. What do you see? I smiled, looking out at the horizon. I see us. I see Mia. I see a life worth living. She squeezed my hand, her voice soft. I see that too. For the first time in what felt like forever, I was excited about what lay ahead. The pain of the past had shaped me, but it no longer defined me. I had survived, and I had come out stronger. The future was mine to claim. The days turned into weeks, and my new life began to feel not just real, but permanent. The chaos that Jenna and Derek had unleashed was now a distant memory, though remnants of that storm occasionally resurfaced. It was one of those remnants that came knocking on a quiet Friday evening. I was in the kitchen with Mia, helping her decorate cupcakes for a class project. Rachel was in the living room, flipping through a magazine, when the doorbell rang. I'll get it, Mia called, running toward the door. No, sweetheart, I said quickly, wiping my hands on a dish towel. I'll get it. I opened the door to find Jenna standing there, clutching a folder to her chest. She looked tired, almost frail, her once vibrant presence now muted. Jason, she said softly, her eyes darting past me toward the warm glow of the house. Can we talk? I hesitated, then stepped outside and closed the door behind me. What do you want, Jenna? I asked, keeping my voice steady. I needed to see you, she said, holding up the folder. It's about Mia. My stomach tightened. What about her? She's fine, Jenna said quickly. But I've been thinking a lot about the damage I caused. To her. To you. To everyone. I crossed my arms unmoved. And? I want to make things right, she said, her voice trembling. I know I can't undo what I did, but I want to try to repair some of the damage. For Mia's sake. I raised an eyebrow. Why now? She looked down at the folder in her hands. Because I've lost everything. My job, my friends, my reputation, everything except Mia. And I don't want to lose her too. Jenna opened the folder and handed me a document. It was a legal statement, relinquishing her claims to joint custody and agreeing to supervised visitation only. "This is my way of showing you that I'm serious," she said. "I know she's better off with you, Jason. You're a great father." Her words caught me off guard. For all her faults, I hadn't expected this level of self-awareness or accountability. "Why should I trust you?" I asked, my voice laced with skepticism. "Because I have nothing left to lose," she said simply. "And because I owe this to both of you." I took the document and studied it, my mind racing. It was a significant gesture, but it didn't erase the pain she'd caused. "I'll think about it," I said finally, tucking the paper under my arm. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. As she turned to leave, she paused and looked back at me. "I'm sorry, Jason," she said, tears welling in her eyes. "For everything." Her words hung in the air as she walked away, disappearing into the night. Back inside, Rachel looked up from the couch, her expression curious but not intrusive. "Everything okay?" she asked. "Yeah," I said, setting the document on the kitchen counter. "Just an old ghost trying to make amends." She nodded, sensing I didn't want to elaborate, and returned to her magazine. Later that night, as I sat alone in my office, I reread Jenna's statement. Part of me wanted to believe she was sincere, that she was truly trying to make things right. But another part of me couldn't forget the betrayal, the lies, and the destruction she'd caused. The decision weighed heavily on me, but in the end, I signed the agreement. Mia deserved stability, and if this document ensured that, I wasn't going to stand in the way. The next few weeks passed quietly. Jenna respected the boundaries we'd set, showing up only for her scheduled visits with Mia. She was attentive and patient, though still a shadow of the woman I once knew. One evening, after picking Mia up from a visit, I noticed she was unusually quiet in the car. "Everything okay, sweetheart?" I asked. "Yeah," she said, staring out the window. "Mom said she's proud of me." Her words surprised me. Jenna had never been particularly vocal about her pride or admiration, even when we were married. "She should be," I said, glancing at her in the rearview mirror. "You're amazing, Mia." She smiled faintly, but her thoughts seemed elsewhere. Rachel continued to be a pillar of strength in my life. She was patient and understanding, never pushing me to move faster than I was ready. One evening, as we sat on the porch watching the sun set, she reached for my hand. "You've come so far," she said softly. "So have you," I replied, squeezing her hand gently. She smiled. "Maybe we're exactly where we're supposed to be." Despite Jenna's attempts to make amends, I remained cautious. Trust was something she could never fully regain, but her efforts were enough to ease the lingering resentment. As for Derek, he remained a distant memory, a shadow in the background of a life I no longer cared to revisit. The scars of betrayal were still there, but they were fading, replaced by new memories, new love, and new beginnings. For the first time in years I felt whole. It was a quiet Saturday morning, the kind that had become my favorite. The smell of freshly brewed coffee filled the house, mingling with the soft hum of music from the radio. Mia sat at the dining table, coloring a picture of a butterfly, her face glowing with concentration. Rachel leaned against the counter, sipping her coffee and watching her with a warm smile. Life wasn't perfect, but it was good, better than I'd dared to hope for. In the months since Jenna's final attempt at reconciliation, I'd found a balance that felt solid. Mia had adjusted beautifully to our new normal, and Rachel had seamlessly become part of our lives. Her kindness, her patience, and her love had been exactly what we needed to heal. And I had healed. The wounds Jenna and Derek left behind had once felt insurmountable. But now, they were just scars, reminders of a time when I'd been tested and had emerged stronger. That morning, Rachel looked over at me, her eyes sparkling with something unspoken. "What's on your mind?" I asked, setting down my mug. She hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "I was thinking about how far you've come. How far we've come." I nodded, my chest tightening with gratitude. "It hasn't been easy. But I couldn't have done it without you." She stepped closer, resting her hand on mine. You didn't just survive, Jason. You thrived. That's something to be proud of. Her words stayed with me as the day unfolded. That evening, after Mia had gone to bed, Rachel and I sat on the porch, wrapped in the soft glow of string lights. The air was warm, carrying the scent of freshly cut grass and summer blooms. I've been thinking, I said, breaking the comfortable silence. About? Rachel asked, tilting her head. About the future, I replied, my voice steady. About what I want, and what I'm ready for. She looked at me curiously, her eyes searching mine. I never thought I'd be here, I admitted. I never thought I'd find happiness again, or that I'd trust anyone the way I trust you. Her breath hitched, and I reached for her hand. Rachel, you've been my rock through everything. You've loved me and Mia when we needed it most. I can't imagine my life without you. Tears filled her eyes as I reached into my pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Her hand flew to her mouth as I opened it, revealing a simple but elegant ring. Will you marry me? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. She nodded, tears streaming down her face. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Our wedding was a small, intimate affair held in the backyard of the home I'd once feared would become a prison of memories. Instead, it had transformed into a place of love and new beginnings. Mia stood beside me as my best girl, her smile brighter than the sun. My parents beamed with pride, their support unwavering. Even Jenna, surprisingly, sent a heartfelt message of congratulations, acknowledging that she had no place there but wishing us happiness nonetheless. As Rachel and I exchanged vows, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known in years. This was my life now, rebuilt, renewed, and filled with love. After the ceremony, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Rachel and I stood together, watching Mia chase fireflies across the lawn. This is it, Rachel said softly, leaning against me. This is everything. I nodded, pulling her close. It is. The past no longer held power over me. Jenna and Derek were chapters in a story that had ended, lessons learned the hard way. Now I was writing a new story, one filled with love, laughter, and the promise of a bright future. And for the first time in a long time, I was truly, undeniably happy.